These photographers are not in any order. They're just organized by category. So we begin with street photography. This young man, Mr. Jackson, has been taking excellent and quite amazing photos of street life, mostly at night in London. He's been featured on other photography channels, but I don't think this guy is overrated at all, just because of the amount of work and dedication that goes into his photography. Definitely someone to look out for if you're interested at all in street photography. Next up, we jump to the other side of the pond, to the United States. Idina Litovsky is a working professional photographer, as you can see, and I think she very accurately captures the feeling of walking around Manhattan or Brooklyn at night. She obviously is a very talented photographer. All the photographers that we're going to talk about are, but just her level of the attention to detail here, the interesting angles she finds. And recently, she's been capturing the life in the city, obviously with the raging of the COVID pandemic. Finally, rounding out the street category, Craig Whitehead, commonly known as 6 Street Under. So if you do shoot street, you already know about Craig. I think his work just speaks for itself. It's one of these accounts that makes you almost want to quit photography because of how good it is. The photos look like they could be stills out of a movie, certainly something like out of Mad Men. This guy obviously has the eye and the skills to back it up, and he just finds interesting compositions everywhere. Now, I think he mostly takes his pictures in Cambridgeshire, but there's stuff in London and stuff in New York City as well. Moving on to architecture, we have one of the gods of architecture photography, Mike Kelly. Amazingly lit, amazingly post-processed work, stuff that obviously belongs on the magazine cover. And this is work from someone who's at the top of their game. So it's quite nice that we get to see a little bit inside that world. It's accounts like this that show you what's going on in terms of state of the art. Leblanc, or actually Sebastian Weiss, is a photographer in Hamburg, Germany, and he's passionate about concrete aesthetics. I like concrete as much as the next man. Earlier in my life, I learned how to calculate the forces on a pre-stressed concrete, but this man is obviously approaching it from a design standpoint, and he's finding the beauty in the patterns and the shapes and the hard edges and the repetition of the various architecture out there. Joe Fletcher is our final guy in the architecture space, and I mean, just the work is quite amazing. Here we have what looks like a simple scene until you actually start looking at it, until you see we have the koi fish in the foreground, the walkway, we have the swimming pool with the guy, we have the trees in the background. So it's definitely a 3D feeling that you get. So Joe is a master of kind of combining the organic with the inorganic. If you've ever tried to do this yourself, you know how tough it is. But he does it masterfully. A lot of his work actually features people, which is very nice. It's adds a layer of complexity because we ultimately build these dwellings, to dwell in them. Next up, we have Heinrich Bindig, a Dutch photographer and a master of fine art and portraits. Has a level of skill that might be out of reach for most, unless you make photography really your full-time occupation and profession. Because this kind of mastery of composition, lighting, posing, or just finding extremely unique and creative ways to shoot portraits, which is a genre that has been obviously explored to the death, kind of sitting right there in between portraits and fine art photography. There's a lot we can learn from Hemi. Joey L, big name. Joey goes out to interesting places and takes pictures, really quite amazing portraits of regular people. He's brought his deep experience with professional studio portrait photography and has brought it on location. If you're at all interested in environmental portraiture, Joey's someone to follow. Finally, in the portrait realm, we have the Kitcheners. And what's going on here? Why are we talking about wedding photographers? Well, regardless of what you think about the institution of marriage, you can appreciate the fact that it takes a lot to stand out in a sea of wedding photographers that all pretty much do the same thing. And these guys, they combine very interesting ideas, compositions, and a very moody Scottish backdrop to create wedding work that, well, frankly belongs in a gallery. Very dreamy scenes, unique posing, You don't need to be in the Scottish Highlands to produce interesting wedding photography. But I think it's important to surround yourself and be influenced by photographers that are trying out new and creative stuff. Mark Adamos. You've probably already seen Mark's work. There's a certain type of landscape photography which I like to describe as like the God shot type. Extremely dramatic, cinematic, high dynamic range, sometimes wide shots, sometimes stitch shots, but definitely these kind of awe-inspiring landscapes that are obviously heavily post-processed. Thousands of photographers doing this kind of stuff now, but Mark is kind of the guy who pioneered it and made it big, so you might as well go straight to the source. Just go with Mark. Daniel Corden, someone who does dreamy type of landscape shots. He finds compositions that look like they belong on the covers of fairy tale stories. He goes to places all around the world. Mongolia here, Fuji, Japan. These guys are the ones, truly living the Instagram photographer life, except they're actually producing work that really justifies them going there. If I were to go to Baikal, it's uncertain that I would produce anything close to this. Finally, in the abstract world, we have Victor Lima, a photographer based in Chile, I believe, in San Pedro de Atacama, in the Atacama Desert, which everybody knows is one of the best places in the world to stargaze because of how clear the skies are. And Victor just takes really impressive astrophotography. Obviously, all of these are compositions, because if you've ever tried to do astrophotography, you know how difficult it is. Amazing astrophotography work definitely inspires you to go out there at night and try out some Milky Way shots for yourself. Jimmy Chin, so 2.8 million followers. You guys probably already followed this guy, but as you know, Jimmy Chin is the kind of award-winning, Oscar-winning photographer, cinematographer who's been up Mount Everest, who takes pictures of Alex Honnold as he goes up Yosemite, kind of at the top 5% of not only photography, but skiing and mountain climbing and whatnot. And when you combine those two, you get extremely rare shots that most of us are just never going to be able to capture. So definitely someone to follow. He's always out there doing something interesting. Chris Burkhard is kind of the god of the travel photographers. He just goes everywhere and takes really, really pretty pictures. It's a combination of sports, drone, landscape, portrait, you name it. This guy's just out there shooting lots of frames, getting some good ones, putting the best ones on here. Sean Heimrichs is our first wildlife photographer, someone who's focusing on underwater stuff. So Sean is not only a photographer, but a conservationist, which is, I think, very important. We are in the middle of the 6th major extinction, and our oceans are definitely under threat. Very interesting stuff, and he combines the photos with useful captions. You can learn more about the species, what is threatening them right now, and perhaps even how you can help. I'm Evi Tali, and she is a National Geographic photographer and a Nikon ambassador, and she puts up amazing work here, mostly from her conservation work in Africa. So, classic National Geographic kind of stuff. Just extremely talented photographer, beautiful animals. If you're ever interested in doing wildlife photography, this is someone to follow. Let's move on to our photojournalists, and we begin with Marcus Yam. He's a Southeast Asian photographer and currently an LA Times foreign correspondent. And he's actually going out there and shooting the important work, the work that needs to be shot, the stories that need to be told. So some of this stuff may not be appropriate for younger audiences because it does show extremely uncomfortable scenes. But he has recently worked from Nagorno-Karabakh, the conflict over there, Afghanistan. Anastasia Taylor Lind is another photojournalist. I think she's known for her war photography work, the lives of civilians over there and how that conflict has been affecting the region. Very important work that she's doing. Definitely follow her. Okay, we're in the home stretch now. Abstract photographers. And we begin with Konrad from Berlin. Konrad is, he certainly has the eye of a designer. Very interesting compositions, leading lines, reflections, patterns, shapes, symmetry, asymmetry. This is a kind of a talented artist who's really showing off his skills. And again, he's not going to far-flung locations. He's doing all this stuff in his home city of Berlin. Okay, next up we have Nguyen. Just look at his account without even zooming into any of the pictures. We can see that there's this kind of pinkish pastel approach here, even if the scenes are unrelated and they're all taken on different days. It's a low contrast, very light tones. He finds beauty in, literally everyday compositions. A telephone hanging on a wall, a bus approaching a bus stop. Nguyen's account is a masterclass of color, of composition, of texture and tone. Finally, if there's an account that's going to convince you to buy a drone, it's this one, Abstract Aerial Art. It's two UK brothers photographing bizarre aerial images from around the world, and that's pretty much all you need to know. They are producing extremely interesting work that we weren't getting before because none of us had access to a helicopter. But these top-down shots give us a whole new perspective on objects that we've been living around this whole time. So these guys go around the world, they find the most interesting shots, and it makes you really want to travel, buy a drone, get out there, and take more photos. And that's ultimately what it's all about. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this little video here. I'm not saying these are the 21 best photographers in the world. I just wanted to point out 21 good people to follow. Even if you don't shoot drone photography, you don't shoot portraits, it's helpful to follow people that are shooting photos from other domains because you bring some of their ideas back into your own work. If you have other photographers that you really like to follow on Instagram, let us know in the comments below. And as always, guys, thanks for watching. Subscribe for more, and I'll see you next time.